All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I apologize if there weren't enough handouts. This is a fantastic turnout. Thank you very much for taking the time to come out tonight. My name is Leah Bickford. I'm the chair of the Dresden Education Exploratory Committee. We have our members. I'm going to introduce them here in a second, but before we go into it, I just wanted to go into a couple of administrative items. We have the presentation handout. We also have the glossary of the terms that we're going to be addressing during the presentation. We understand that some of the terms are kind of difficult to understand, so we have those definitions. Reed was nice enough to put that together for tonight. So just so you're tracking, that's where we're going to leave it for handouts for right now. We have handouts with additional resources, but we're going to wait until after the presentation to ensure everybody is engaged in the presentation. And then we can visit those handouts at the end where I'll discuss what those are. Just a couple of things, just kind of bringing out the elephant in the room. We understand that there's high emotions when it comes to the education, the future of the education and our current education system in our town. But just so we understand, I'm going to be going over the purpose of the committee again, to make sure that everyone understands. It is in the handout as well, just so that you understand. We're basing this fact-finding information based off from what the select board asked us to do tonight. So just so everyone knows, just please be polite and respectful. We're going to open it up to questions during the presentation. We're not going to wait until the end. So that way everyone can get their questions answered as we're going through this. If you're new here, bathrooms are behind you. And I also want to point out, as you heard, the presentation is live on Zoom. So just so you all understand before we get into it. All right, any questions of me before we move into the presentation? All right, let's get right into it. So I'm the chair, Leah Bickford. We have Cindy Mueller for, she's part of the committee as well. We have Reed Anderson, Josh and Erica Atkinson, Karen Moody. I'm not sure if she made it out tonight. Felicia Waterhouse, she's actually on the Zoom listening. She has a pre-K student that started today at Dresden. So she's at home taking care of her. Lisa Hewitt also is our select board representative. She's been going to most, if not all, of our many meetings that we've had over the past year and a half. I also want to point out Sharon Lilly. She came to all of our meetings and recorded them, and then did a lot of meeting minutes. Some of our meetings were up to 2.5 hours at times. So it was a lot of information to digest and go through. So we just want to make sure we point out that Sherry was a part of that with us. All right, so let's go into the first slide. All right, so what is our purpose? So our purpose was to look at the educational systems that are available for Dresden. So we wanted to we looked at a bunch of different options. We have our current Dresden is part of RSU2. It includes Monmouth, Farmingdale, and Hollowell. Are there any questions on the slide? All right, next. All right, so this committee was based off from a survey that was done in 2022. We received 96 responses. The main reason why we were our committee was charged was based off from the would you like to be a committee to keep exploring and bring back options? So we did have 64 that responded that they wanted us to do that. So that is how our committee was charged based off from that survey. Are there any questions on this slide? All right, next. So how we collected our information. So we went to actually all the different districts and talked to the different superintendents. All of those meetings that we have and the reports that were made by our committee members are available to you. If you would like them emailed to you, we can absolutely provide that. It's a lot of information that we have over a year and a half. So We don't want to overwhelm you with too much of it. Some of those superintendent interviews, I know we have one in the room out back, the Wiscasset superintendent. We sat down with her for a while, and it was great. We learned a lot at each one of the districts. We got tours of the different schools, which was fantastic, getting to see what the differences are for the different schools. So those included RSU 1, which is Bath, the Bath area. RSU 2 is our current district, which is the Dresden Elementary School, Monmouth, Pauldale, Farmingdale area. RSU 11 is, did I miss one? No. RSU 11 is Gardner, yes. So we did get to speak with them as well. Richmond across the river, Wiscasset, and we also went and talked to Fayette. And the reason why is they're a different type of school district where they own their elementary school and they tuition out their middle and high school students. So we wanted to see how that works. So we got to sit down with George at Fayette. He's now retired this summer, but we got a lot of information on that. So more to follow. There's more information on that in the upcoming slides. We also reviewed multiple years of the ED 279s. So just so you know what that is, that's the state's budget sheet for indicating each school district expenditures and state allocations. So it's a formula that the state uses so that they can figure out how much funds should be distributed depending on that district. We also have some ED 279s printed for you as handouts to look at the end. There's a lot to them. Cindy was nice enough to bring a handout that explains how to read an ED 279. We also use the ESSA dashboard, and we can go into that a little bit more, but this is how we overall collected our information over the past year and a half. Any questions on that slide?
Can I just point out, the ESSA is a federal mandated program, and that's like the school report card. If you want to know teacher standings, you want to know how many kids in each class, how many schools in each district. It's a federal thing, so it gets reported to the state, and the state distributes it all.
It's the replacement of No Child Left Behind. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act. And it's got a whole lot of reporting requirements, and it all is publicly available on that dashboard, which in the glossary, that definition is there, as it is a link, and that glossary will be available electronically, so you can just click.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just RFU 11, I thought that the Gardner was still an MSAD, that they didn't change over to RFU, so that might, I don't know, I might be wrong.
I
but
think that's what threw me off actually when I read
yeah,
that. 'Cause
I
it
think
is an
still
MSA.
MSAD 11 because they were big enough, so they didn't have to go into the RFU when the RFUs were started. Again, that may have changed over the time that I was on the school board here, but that's what I remembered happening.
And in many cases, that difference of SAD and RSU is just a legal doing business
That's correct,
as
that's correct,
designation.
yes.
So it's
I'm
just
saying that
a
using
name
RFU from MSAD is made, that you might have it, that would be just going MSAD rather than RFU.
Any other questions? All right, let's move on. So we're gonna talk about the options for Dresden. So we can stay with the RSU 2. We can break from the RSU 2, keep our elementary school open, tuition out our students in grades 6 through 12. Or we can break from the RSU 2, tuition out all students K through 12. Or we can break from RSU 2 and join a different school system. And then the next slides, we're gonna get into those more in depth. Any questions? Slide. All right, so remaining with RSU 2. So this gives you the cost to remain with RSU 2. So in 2021 to 2022, Dresden's estimated spending was $2,007,524.70 for 155 students. This was a cost of $12,951.77 per pupil. And I won't read off, like you can see the numbers, but you can see, like with any district that you would be in, the cost is gonna go up. So you can see that that costs go up gradually up until the 2023-2024 school year. And this is per the ED 279 that we received from the state. Any questions on that? All right. So things to consider with the present arrangement. So we have the cost sharing and it's based off from the percentage of town valuation. So that's based off from, so say like we take Monmouth. Monmouth has a chunk of that cost that they have to have. And this is how the RSU works, right? So Dresden has a chunk of that cost that we have to have, right? Then Farmingdale Hollowell. So that's how that valuation or the of getting that cost sharing out there. And let me know if I missed anything, guys, on this one. So right now we have enhanced staff development opportunities in the RSU two. And these are all mixed up, by the way. They're not a pros and cons list. We mixed them in to just show to be fair and impartial here. Some of the things that we've found is there's few to no opportunities for after-school programs at elementary school and difficulty providing transportation for secondary students. We have local representation on district-wide school board. We have 2 school board reps, which are in the room. The long distance and travel times between schools within the district. I think somebody had mentioned going to Halldale is a haul. I think I heard that at one point. Monmouth, right? Monmouth is a long ways. There is no late bus for middle school and high school students on Fridays. Sometimes that hinders a student that's in sports with getting to those practices. There's currently shared services provided within the district. So the finances, the administration, staff, transportation, technology, that's all shared currently in the RSU two. I guess a con is a single after-school drop-off location. Students are not dropped off at home. There's also unique challenges for provision of transportation between schools to accommodate early dismissal and late start times for staff development. And lastly, we have 2 school board members from Dresden out of a board of 9 members. That's our current RSU2. All right, so how do we compare to the area to other school districts? So you can see we put RSU2, we have the state average all the way to the left. We have RSU2, SAD 11 or MSAD 11, RSU1 for Bath and Wiscasset. So you can see that we have the graduation rates on there, and this is again ESSA dashboard. That's where we got this information from 2022 to 2023. So of course, these numbers have changed a little bit since we pulled this data. But just showing you based off from what we have at RSU2 and then compared to the other schools there. Any questions on that? All right, so option 2 is to become a standalone unit and tuition students in grades 6 through 12. So what would that look like? So we'd have Dresden Elementary School would stay open and we would be under the direction of the town. Just to kind of give you an idea of that with Fayette, their town administrator is actually the one that oversees like the budget and stuff like that for the town. Or I'm sorry, for the school. There's local control. It would entail election of the school committee, hiring administrative staff and providing transportation for all elementary school students. And students 6 through 12 would be tuitioned out to schools that would accept the students. So some of the options for 6 through 12 is Richmond across the river, Wiscasset, Gardner, Lincoln Academy, and Halldale. And then another thing that we took into consideration that we wanted to point out is that private schools do not take state funds and therefore do not have to accept kids. And then it shows you the cost per DOE. The state sets a maximum of $13,312 per pupil. And that's in 9 through 12. The other schools can charge. The other schools may charge less. Grades 6 through 8, the maximum cost is $11,446.16. You guys have anything to add to this? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, so when we're talking about remaining with RSU two, you list a lot of cons regarding transportation, be it after school, students will drop off. I'm not seeing any of those issues brought up in any of these. And I think we're not getting an accurate picture of what some of the options really may be. I see a lot of cons being listed for our RSU two. But where are the cons? Let's say what this is.
For that thought in that slot.
Okay.
It's a very,
It is a great question.
Yep, I have a question.
just to clarify, so just because like Pauldale, Richmond, Gardner, Wisconsin aren't private schools, they could still choose to not accept some Dresden students at the secondary level. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that just because it's a private school, they still, if they see a student with an IEP or a student with like neurodivergence or might learn differently, they could easily say no.
Yes,
And do we know in talking with these districts, their numbers and capacity to take on other kids in Dresden?
I think we were looking into that.
I mean,
yeah.
So they can't say no specifically because of an IEP.
Correct. No, I
That's
know
a,
that.
that's a protected
Yes.
status. They're not allowed to do that. But they can if they are at or beyond capacity
Which.
in a particular
is
grade level. So they
special
can,
it is.
they can do that, but they can't say, oh, you have an IEP, we're not taking. it."
Right.
Just,
And so for the discussion though, did you talk, and I know it's like just exploring options,
yes.
but did they state where they are at reaching capacity in those districts? Even see if it's even something they're willing to accept?
some of them, yeah.
Yes.
Some of them did not.
Okay, and so that would be in the information that you could provide with the surveys and stuff?
I think we were
That's
kind
in
of
more
waiting
of our
to find out
conversation.
Okay,
Yeah.
where people wanted us to go.
okay, okay, awesome.
I mean, I think it probably goes without saying, Halldale currently has a lot of our students.
Right, that goes without saying.
So that one I think is probably fairly obvious. Other enrollments are a little bit more of the individual conversations. And those are in a lot of those notes that we took over the
Yeah.
last year and a half. But some of them do have plenty of space, some of them said we're already full.
Right, exactly, okay.
So would this be an ongoing contract with certain schools on a year-to-year basis per school year? Who would take Dresden kids and who wouldn't? Would this be something that the town would have to meet on every year? Or would this be some sort of a contract that's locked into place for 5 years, 2 years, taking on Dresden children?
So that's based off from, if we were to enter into like another district, like if we left the RSU, we'd have to break that contract and accept a new one with another district.
In this case, where we would just tuition students out,
That's what I'm asking.
there's
You know,
no
contract.
agreement with the town.
Yeah.
As to sending those students, it's an individual family choice as to where those students are sent.
So we would have to do superintendent agreements with the
I'm not
school.
It's not a it's not a superintendent's agreement because they're not coming from one school with a
Sure.
superintendent into another. Because there's no school in our town, we then transfer our tuition dollars, that maximum amount or less, to that school.
Yeah.
And that student goes there.
Yeah.
And each individual family would enroll their student in whichever school.
Yeah.
They choose.
An
to send them to.
example might be Fayette. They at one time belonged to an RSU and they got away from that. They own their elementary school, they have their own transportation, they provide for the education of the pre-K to 5th grade. After that, the majority of people in the community send their children to Marana Club. And so the town has said, we can do things to help transport that, but they're not obligated to go there. Some of them go to Lisbon, some of them go to Winthrop. But it's the parent's choice wherever they want to go, and if
Yeah.
there's room for them to be accepted, they'll go there. It seems to work out well for them.
But a piece to keep in mind with this option is what Cindy said, if there's room.
Yeah,
So
that's the
if
key.
student A goes to school yellow, and that's what they choose, but then that school, their own town has like a boom and they get to capacity. There's no guarantee that student A can go to that same school the next year.
Sure.
So there's the potential for a lack of consistency from year to year.
Yeah.
And the parent provides the transportation.
And Fayette, the majority that go to Marana, the town provides transportation to that one school. Parents provide transportation to the others.
Yeah.
So here. We provide transportation because we're obligated to go to all.
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to talk on the superintendent in Wisconsin. When we withdrew from RSU 12, we had to have our plan approved by the state DOE. And if you don't have a high school, I do know that the state will need you to have an agreement with another school to take your high school students. It doesn't mean you have to send them there. An example is RSU 12. So we withdrew from RSU 12 and they have no high school. And there's kids all have school choice, but Wisconsin has to take all their students because they have that agreement with us. That way every student is guaranteed to get an education and have access to an education. I also want to point out our chronic absenteeism was never that high. It was reported incorrectly.
So two important notes. Yes, there has to be a default option.
Yeah.
Right? So there is an agreement as a default
But you don't have to go. there.
accepting school, but you don't have to go
You
there.
have choice.
And yes, it's an important note on that ESSA dashboard that applies to all of the schools. The data in that ESSA dashboard is only as good as the reporting of it in.
Sure.
Sometimes you get garbage out when you put garbage in. And so sometimes when data is uploaded incorrectly or something is amiss, awry in it, and it goes both directions. I mean, there's chronic absenteeism rates of 0 and chronic absenteeism rates of 100. Neither of those are accurate because something in Power School and attendance wasn't quite right, but the data is there. So just take them with a grain of salt.
Do you know where Richmond and Lincoln Academy stand on the ESSA in that chart?
We pulled it, but we might.
Richmond, Richmond data. The most recent data available in that ESSA dashboard data was that 22-23. And that is when RSU, they were part of RSU 2. And so there's no separate individual data point for Richmond at that point, as a district.
So RSU 2 numbers include Richmond.
In that 22-23 data, yes.
And I don't know that you could find Lincoln Academy on there because it's private.
Lincoln Academy will be in there.
The
We
ESSA.
did grab it at some point and I don't recall.
I don't remember the Lincoln Academy.
There was something to it. There was. It was 9 to 12 and now. I don't know. But the Lincoln Academy is in there that can be searched.
I also,
Get a certain amount of state.
you know, I also want to say, I have 3 little boys. My husband and I live in Dresden. You know, we have a 5 and a 6 and a 7-year-old. And we just enrolled them in Shop Point 2 weeks ago. And our middle son has an IEP. There was no issues with him being accepted at Shop Point. There was 0. It was full disclosure. There was emails back and forth from the special education department, from school board committees, from superintendent, from RSU 2, all going to the superintendent at Shop Point. And it was wonderful to be a part of and to see. But in the meantime, I caution people, like, don't get scared of that. Like, it's okay. Every kid is different. Every kid is different. It doesn't matter if it's a private school or not. Lincoln Academy is a private school. And I know that if you start down the whole Google pathway, everyone is gonna give you feedback and saying, oh, they don't have to accept kids with IEPs or speech. That's not true. It's a case by case basis, and if you're willing to put the work in, as of course, my husband and I are, and I just speak for us and our situation, that, you know, I think the outcome will be what you want it to be in the end. So,
Thank you for that.
yeah, you're welcome.
All right, I guess we can move on to the next slide. So, this is another option or other things to consider, sorry, with this option of becoming an MSU municipal school unit. Tuition students in grades 6 through 12. So depending on where students choose to go, parents will most likely be required to provide transportation. We were just discussing that. Dresden would be responsible for transporting only students attending Dresden Elementary. So we're owning our elementary school. We need to be able to bus them to and from home. Dresden would not have a representative on the school board. So that's one part of being in an RSU. We do have the ability to have a voice with our 2 school board members.
But that's only at the schools where we'd send tuition those students to. We'd have our own school board for Dresden Elementary.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
We would have 100% of the representation on that board, but
Yes.
none at the tuition and.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So students with an IEP, we were just talking about that, would have no limitations on where they can go based on IEP. But the school can say no to any student if they are at capacity. That's what you were saying. There's no guarantee that a student who tuitions to one school will be able to go there for the duration of their education, and that could cause a lapse in where they're going to school for their education. So they could end up bouncing around. Students who are currently homeschooled will also have the option of attending a public school. This might increase the budget should they decide to attend a public school. Because obviously homeschooling, the parents are fronting that cost for the homeschooling. Each individual family would need to decide where to send their children or child or children. This means you might have students from one family attending more than one school system. So we have a pretty wide area here of where students are going. Our total cost would be the tuition cost for grades 6 through 12, plus the cost of running Dresden Elementary. Startup costs, as well as the ongoing costs of transportation, administration, communication services, etc., as well as the operational costs of these services. And I know when Richmond pulled out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we did some type of agreement where they were able to still use our administration, right? Or our superintendent
So
office.
for the beginning startup, as far as transitioning to debt services and things that were still partnership in contracts, like when we bought buses, they took on the new bus. We also helped share the administrative costs, making sure that transfer of ownership, payments and everything happens in the new school system. Now that we're a year beyond their separation, they have their own administration, we have our own, it's a complete break. So it's only that initial getting on your feet and go transition.
Any questions? Yes.
Just one bullet point that might, just to kind of add to the last one. Just taking into account like out of district placements, so I know of at least one student in Dresden who attends an out of district placement, and with transportation, that's like over $100,000 a year that Dresden or MSU, whatever, would have to absorb in their budget.
Yes.
With option 1, we talked about costs to remain with RSU 2, but I don't see in this option any cost estimation or idea of what it would cost us to go with it. Is that something that you guys evaluated?
We did. You saw on the previous slide, perhaps that maximum tuition that the other schools are allowed to charge.
Yeah.
In most cases, that's what many of them charge, because that's, it actually ends up costing them more.
Hire a school board and a superintendent and buses and bus drivers and staff.
So in here, in this option, it's the cost of those tuition outs plus the cost of operating our own. And we do have, it's one of those handouts that we'll point out later on. A hypothetical ED 279, the state was nice enough to provide us, what would your state subsidy look like if you were to go out on your own? And we have that, we didn't want to hand out because those ED 279s are a beast.
I don't need an
But-
EDU 79, I'm just looking for a dollar amount. Like, it's 2.1 million for us to be in RSU too, but it's
I
the
think,
same.
I think you'll see in an upcoming slide, we did do a comparison with Fayette. With that, it's hard to pinpoint exactly, and you'll see us mention that in the next, it's in another slide or two here. I forget where exactly.
Maybe the next
Oh,
slide.
similar is.
Similar, yeah. You'll see it in an upcoming slide.
Your questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, when this, we would not have a voice. When I was chairman of the school board in Dresden, I was also Dresden's representative to what was started off as MSAD 14 and then became RSU 2.
Yes.
I went to all those meetings as a representative from Dresden, but I did not have a vote, but I did have a voice. So I'm just wondering if, had you talked at all about when we get if this is what you're gonna choose and we have our own school board here, that people would be assigned to the various schools that that children are going to, so that they could at least have a voice at the table, because I considered my voice for perhaps 3 of the 6 years that I was on the school board here to have an influence in what was done at that. So I guess if that was one of the things that it ended up having something like that, that one of the things that Dresden would want to do would be to kind of push a little bit more so that people who are on the school board, and if there were 5 people on the school board and there's 5 school system kids are going to, that one person would each have at least a chance to sit as a representative of Dresden at a school board meeting on that.
I suppose that could be something the town could choose to do.
I think.
We'd have to work it out
Their
with each
principal
school.
or their superintendent would speak on behalf of the Fayette school for the kids that are in the upper grades.
That's right. And, I think we go into it in the next slide, but, yeah, we'll just go, I'll jump too far ahead. Any other questions on this slide? Okay. All right, so what does this look like in another school? So we discussed Fayette, so that's the one that we chose to go and, talk to. So as of February FY 2024, Fayette has 82 kids in grades pre-K through 5 at their elementary school, and they tuition out their students in grades 6 through 12, which they had 66 students. Their school budget this year was $2,461,795 for all students. This is an average per pupil cost of $16,683.75. And then as of February of 2024, Dresden has 74 kids in pre-K through 5. So you can see we're showing you that we're pretty similar to Fayette, which is why we chose that district to go and find out more information. And they had 79 students in grades 6 through 12. You see Dresden's budget, pretty close to what Fayette's was, or mine, yeah. And that's according to the EDU 279 for the 2023-24 report. And the average cost is $14,005.19. And then you can see the mill rate down at the bottom for Fayette 2023 was 13.35 at 65%. Goes to their taxes to the school budget. Per 1,000 house valuation, $8.67 in taxes for the schools. And Dresden's mill rate is in 2023 was 15.6 to 55%. So you can see they've gone up as well. I think it's just kind of what happens over the years with things going up, cost of gas, cost of transportation, and all of that. So, and I think we go in a little bit more in depth on the next slide. Are there questions on this one though, before we move on? All right.
Starting to get to that question that you were asking about comparing us with another tuition out option.
All All right, so the option 3, separate from RSU 2, tuition all students out. This means Dresden Elementary would close and each student would go to the school of their choice. So things to consider with the tuition all would be parents to be responsible for providing transportation. There may not be full day pre-K offered at any of the schools that are available. Dresden wouldn't have any members on the school boards of these schools, so no voice. If a Dresden student had a specialized placement, Dresden would still be responsible for the cost of that placement as well as transportation costs. That's to the child you were talking about. And then any financial factors to consider, like the cost of the building, maintenance, and those sort of things. Any questions on that slide? Right. And then option 4 is to join a different existing system. So it looks similar to RSU 2, we would just be going to a different district. This would create a new system. This new system would involve reorganization to think about what the schools would look like, which schools would be needed to teach which classes, grades or classes, sorry, would grades need to be combined, etc. Dresden might close and we might have, we would have representation on the school board, so we would have a voice. So, that's like our current with RSU 2. So, in order to withdraw from, our existing school system, we'd have to withdraw from RSU 2 before, and there is a legal contract with RSU 2 currently. So we would have to break that contract. There's a standardized process for withdrawing that can take 2 to 3 years, and it does typically cost money. I don't know if it's,
It's like building.
No, it's not, well, it's not buildings, it's just you have to,
a legal cost.
legal costs is, yeah,
And
thousands,
feedback are.
tens of thousands of dollars.
We need to find a school system that would accept all of our students in 6 through 12 and possibly K through 5. Any questions on the full tuition or the tuition option? All right. That's the full presentation. Is there any other comments, concerns, discussion? All right, well, just to discuss the resources we have available to you. So over here on this table, we have the RSU 2 ED 279, and that's the state's formula, and it is the current 2024-2025 ED 279 that you can reference. We also have the ESSA dashboard, what it looks like, so that you can check out, you can go in there and check out some of the things like per pupil spending, the grade, the graduation rate for that school, and post-secondary enrollment. So all those statistics are available on that ESSA dashboard. We also have a hypothetical Dresden Elementary ED 279 that was given to us by the Director of Finance for the main DOE. Paula Gravel, I believe her name is. So she put that together for us. So we have that hypothetical ED 279. If you'd like to see what it would look like if Dresden were to become its own standalone unit. So that way you can look at the cost of transportation, teachers, nurses. It has all of that in there. Another one we have, oh, you already have the glossary. I don't need to go over that. We also have from Colleen Longfellow, our Director of Finance at RSU 2, put together a Dresden school budget breakdown. It looks like this. It's got a little, has some cost comparisons up at the top. How the transportation cost looks like, how that's distributed up. Thank you. District wide, so yeah, she has the, all of it broken down, so it's a really handy handout to take a look at what we currently have with RSU 2. Committee members, you have anything else to add?
I would just like to say that of the year and a half here, there was a tremendous amount of time comparing schools. I took ESSA and ED 279s for the past 5 years and looked at what were the students, how many kids were in each district, how much was spent on an ED 279, keeping in mind that the ED 279 is just a state allocation workshop. Doesn't include what you want to spend in your town over and above. So that Dresden goes over and above what the state says it has to have, therefore we pay more money, as I tend to. But we try to come up with some sort of graphs to say, this is the direction that it's all going. And it was interesting looking at Richmond's, when they were part of us, they kept going up and up and up. They left us and suddenly their costs started going down. So it's just, as a layperson, not involved in the school system with teaching and all of that, whatever data I could get my hands on to say, how does this compare with everything going on here? There were some very interesting numbers that came up that don't necessarily correlate with when you go into the schools and see what's happening and stuff. And looking at where you're spending your monies, it's been an interesting journey.
And I would like to say, before you, Mr. Pownal, I'm sorry, to hop on what Cindy said, Reed made some really great graphs to compare the per pupil spending. And you can, I know you can't really tell, but you can see that the slope is generally the same. So yes, it's increasing in our district, but it's increasing in every district at about the same rate. That we're not going straight up while others are plateauing. It's just the nature of education. And the looks of educators.
There's more questions. I think you were in first in the back there. I'll get,
All the documents over there, can all of them be put on Dresden Meet so we can see them later? I see that there's a recording as well. You put everything up.
We'll go on the Dresden website. We'll
Pardon?
go on the Dresden website,
Dresden Meet. That's what it's
the
called.
town website, right? Right.
yes. We had Mr. Tunkel with his hand up
Yes,
next.
I really appreciate the enormous amount of work you all have done.
Thank you.
It's very impressive, and the presentation tonight was really very well done. My question is, was the scope of your charge strictly about finances? Or was there any comparative evaluation in regard to the quality of the education that the children would get under these various scenarios? Was that evaluated? And if so, how was that done?
The charge was very specific on only looking at the different educational avenues that the town of Dresden could take. So we did do some comparison. We tried to pull in as much data without overwhelming, because there is a lot.
Yeah.
So it's taken us 1.5 years to get this out there, but no, as far as like what we were charged with, it was to look at the different educational avenues and fact-based only, nothing biased at all. So that way we can give you your different options. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does partially, but I'm wondering about, like, under these various scenarios, are there different metrics in regard to academic performance or graduation rates or other success models or teacher evaluations, the kind of thing that you point to a school system and say, they got something going there and here's the reason why. It's not just that there's a dollar amount, but there's the other factors.
So it was to find out the charge was to find out what are the options.
Yeah.
And explore what those options look like. Some of that is quantitative data, and that ESSA dashboard is 100% quantitative data,
Right.
right? It does include things like graduation rates. There are standardized test scores available, things like
good.
that. But we were not charged, we were not asked to make any type of qualitative analysis of those.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that
So,
makes sense.
yes, the numbers are there, but we didn't make any value judgment on any option.
Yeah.
That would be your next step.
Value qualitative.
Your next step. If it's decided that the select board does want, and the people do want this committee to move to the next step, they would start doing more research by what option the people are looking at.
We tried to give you data like, what does the state say? What's the state population? What's the state per pupil? What's the state's graduation? What does the state in general, rich, poor, everything all together? We looked at all that and we've got data on that. Then we tried to take districts that were similar to us. Districts at the state, or you can go on to Newsweek Daily or something, and you find the #1 school in the state, #2, #3 schools. What makes them so special? Looked at that data. Then we looked at our surrounding towns and said, what's it like in Richmond? What's it like in Wisconsin? What's it like in Bath? We tried to compare all that data and said that everybody's in the same boat that we are, trying to figure out how do you be financially responsible and fiscally proper to spend town people money. And, you know, it just, see where it goes.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're interested, there is a site called Niche, which rates schools across the country. And so you can look at specific towns. Dresden Elementary and Halldale both got a B. Wiscasset and Richmond at best got a C+. So, but they have different elements, so you can look at the different elements to just get a sense of what a kind of a standardized appraisal. But that comes up when you're thinking of sending your child to a different school in some sense, right? But it's good news that Dresden Elementary and Halldale have the best rating of the towns we normally talk about sending our children to.
And that was one thing, we did come across a lot of those, there are hundreds or thousands of different rating schemes out there, right? You mentioned, right, US News, right, US News World Report, best school in the state. How do they determine best, right? What are their metrics that they're measuring on? You could measure it purely by spending per student. You could measure it purely by test scores. You could measure it by some combination of hundreds of different data points all put together. So that gets to that qualitative best. What does best mean? And so we tried to avoid that kind of qualitative assessment, but just purely here's a quantitative, and then it's up to all of you, all of us townspeople to interpret that. But we did look at some of those rating schemes and we kept struggling with well, yes, but why is that one listed as best, right? Why is this listed as best? And I think it should be no surprise that resources, financial resources, are often tied directly to those. You can do a correlation. We don't know if that's causation, but it's at least correlation. And so we tried to steer away from a lot of the best and worst and that type of ratings, because they're their own metric, and it's up to you all what's important to you, not what US News and World Report says is important to them to get a school to the quote unquote best in the state.
Right, and it's hard as you try to do, put this information into a vacuum, there are always other contributing factors. So without those and not being able to, ascertain where those are coming from, this is the best you can do. So,
Yes.
speaking of best.
Do any of these schools have a trade focus, not just a potentially collegiate focus for their graduates?
Bath does. Bath is huge that way.
Just that?
Bath Tech is a huge,
Oh, yeah, because of
Yeah.
your text.
huge facility, it's beautiful.
It is.
MSD 11 still
And-
has industrial.
Yep. MSAD 11 has an industrial arts program.
Yeah.
There's a tech focus at Lincoln Academy as well.
Can Dresden kids go without, staying with the RSU too? Can the Dresden kids go to any of those?
Only with
Trade.
superintendent's agreement.
Yeah.
I know Bath that's one of the things during the interview process that the principal said absolutely, but they're at capacity. They have no room.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that's what
they're-
we're finding everywhere with these trade
We have
schools.
CATC.
Yeah.
I would imagine they're great.
Exactly.
Question in the back.
Well, I was just gonna say, Region 10 is the school, I work in MSAD 75, so I'm gonna show my bias towards that 75. So Region 10 is the tech school for that area, and I have heard that they're talking about trying to become a separate school district, their own standalone, school, so students won't have to bus back and forth between high school to the tech school. I'd also just like to throw in, because I am a little biased towards SAD 75, it's not very far away, and that would be a good school district to look at. I know our enrollment is down. So, I mean, Bodenham is part of SAD 75, and it's literally across the river from us. Buses from SAD 75 go through Richmond every day, you know, it's, you know, they loop through Richmond, so it's 23 minutes from door to door from each of the middle school, high school, so, you know, that might be another option.
Here, and you talk about like tech and having that, it's interesting because as we were doing all this research, we had talked to an interim superintendent in Wisconsin. And he was saying that when you're looking in, he had gone from school district to school district to fill in for superintendents that had resigned or retired. And his thought was, if you look at the way the school districts are set up, really good systems seem to follow the routes of traffic. And he goes, and if you took Richmond and Dresden and Wisconsin and Booth Bay and you made a tech school, there's one line of road that goes through there. I thought, dreaming outside of the box, we talk about who's gonna educate our kids, but I go, sometimes you can dream beyond what you've got and how you can survive to think about what would be best. That I just thought that was marvelous when he said, great idea.
And Judy, our kids do have access to CATC,
Yes.
and it has automotive and all kinds of other programs. But Jeff said the space is limited, but they do have access to it all. They can follow that.
And there's a funding opportunity through the state for, to build a new school with a tech center. They're looking for schools that are willing to regionalize. So if say this is just dream. But if we shut down Wisconsin High School, you withdrew from RSU 12, and then we could get Olin and Whitefield to agree to send their kids, right? Just dreaming, you could create a regional school unit. It could be located somewhere on 27 in either Wisconsin or Dresden. And then geographically, you could have a brand new high school with a tech center. And then my dream is to have it be a tri-region collaborative so that kids would have the option, you would make an arrangement with Pony and with Bath. And then kids could go in this region, all three directions. So where nobody has plumbing, our school could have plumbing. Sure. Where nobody has composites, we could have composites. Where there's a high demand for welding, Bath could maybe increase welding and get electrical somewhere else. You could do it in a smart way so that more kids can have more access to tech opportunities. It's just like a dream, but I feel like if we keep saying it out loud.
Hey, I'm 75 years old. When I was in kindergarten, my school had plumbing.
It was in the basement.
We're talking.
We had a question here.
Well, I just had a quick comment that, with all the dreaming and the acknowledgement that the schools that are ranked higher or considered better have more resources, I think Dresden made the right choice 20 years ago to link up with RSU 2, so we have access to those resources. And I think we're in a good spot until maybe something like that comes to fruition, you know, a decade down the road.
We didn't have much of a choice 20 years ago.
There were plenty of committees and school boards, I remember.
So what is the next step?
I think based on all of this, if there's interest, we'll send a survey out and we'll ask the townspeople of, we give them what our options are, and do you want us to continue? Do you want to stay? And the committee will pull the survey and the questions together and run it by the select board.
My concern with the survey is this initial survey that spawned this group was in no way represented.
Right.
If you have 96 respondents, that is in no way represented. My wife and I weren't aware of it. We've been aware of it. We would have participated. And my concern is, how then are we going to make this something that we're getting the full participation of having, and the word is going out about it, in an effective manner.
I think the communication will be better this time around. It lacked a little bit the last time. I think it might have been, I'm not sure, maybe a bit of, yeah, and
It's just a mail, the town,
it wasn't really
communication cycle,
advertised well.
I wasn't aware of that
Yeah.
survey either back then, but I think the town communication, whether it's via Facebook, whether it's via that snazzy sign down there, right, that lights up, whatever, maybe, I think there's a lot more communication efforts to get the word out about it. And I think when we presented this to the select board back in May, I forget when, I think it was May. The timeline sounded a little like, give some folks some time to digest, right? This is a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff out there. Time to digest, discuss, ponder the options, give them some thought, and then that survey would come out. So don't expect a survey tomorrow, right?
No.
It's gonna be a little bit. We want folks to have a chance to think through the options, and then a survey would come out saying, which of these options are ones you'd like us to continue pursuing? Which of these options are ones you say, don't even think about it, right? Don't waste your time looking at what that might look like. And then we get probably to some of those analytical assessments of the data, rather than just, here's a data dump. It's more the charge, then it would probably be
It
officially.
would change, right?
Officially a new committee or with a different charge to provide some analysis of the data.
The other thing is when the survey does go out, this is the whole reason why this is being recorded, why these, all these files are gonna be uploaded to the Dresden, is that the survey will have the link so that people that weren't able to make it tonight, because people are busy. We're in sports season right now. Parents are at soccer games, soccer practice, things like that, and that's why we're putting these links on these surveys, so that they'll be able to access, watch it, the same presentation, hear the same questions you guys asked, and hopefully help them make some decisions. So the questions you asked tonight are really good questions, and it's gonna help anybody that hadn't seen this presentation.
And I'd just like to add too, if people still have questions, there's nothing that we can't, compile and present back to the committee, and the committee can start answering them. We're open to getting the biggest response we can get from the townspeople.
This is not your only opportunity
Right.
to ask questions.
Right.
Don't worry.
Sorry, just, I'll be very honest, and I apologize. If I'm being defensive in any way, because I do appreciate all the work that you put into this. But having one child that's gone through RSU 2 from kindergarten on up through, and having another child who's now at Pownalborough Middle School, I'm very pleased with the education that they received. And to be honest with you, I think this whole process has been a little bit unsettling, particularly where I have a son at Pownalborough Middle School. And the prospect of him having to transition, we're in the face. Not only has he received a phenomenal education, and my daughter received a phenomenal education, but we're also talking about children who have formed bonds with students at these schools. And we're going to be breaking those bonds. I think it's something that we have to be very cognizant of. We're talking a lot about numbers. And hopefully there's a time and a place for us to talk about the human impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that. I have two in school right now, middle school. Middle schooler and high schooler, 8th and 9th grade. There is a way that you can, an option, if we were to pull out of the district, where we can opt to keep them there. My kids are not leaving Halldale, they're gonna stay there, they have friends there. they're entrenched, I wouldn't wanna pull them out of there, so,
No.
just so,
And my concern then is would be transportation.
right.
That's, it would be very difficult.
Like if there was an
Parents
option
to-
with RSU two, if we could continue, if we were to withdraw, do some type of consideration of, can there still be a bus sent out for those kids that wanna continue at RSU two?
Obviously at a cost to Dresden.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And much the same way Fayette does with Maranico, right? If Dresden were to withdraw from RSU two, keep our elementary school open, we would obviously bus our kids there. But if hypothetically 50% of our students said, we want to go to Wiscasset instead, and 50% of them said, we want to stay at Halldale, then it would obviously behoove the town to look at saying, let's try to make that work for people. And we might enter into a bus contract of our own to, much like Fayette does to Maranicook, send a bus from Dresden to Halldale and send a bus from Dresden to Wisconsin. I think that just plays out depending on how the numbers go in various places and where it makes sense to say, you know, we have enough to make this make sense, to try to make it more convenient and more reasonable and feasible for parents, because transportation was definitely on that list of already a challenge. So how can we make that better?
The thing that to consider that got me started with this is that when my kids started at Dresden and they've gone through when we were part of Wiscasset. There were like 80 something kids in the school. We're down to like 60, maybe 70 kids now. As the population decreases, we've got an older and older school. Wiscasset condensed. They took their elementary school and their middle school and their high school, and they made it into two schools. We are part of an RSU two, which has got 2 schools in the Monmouth area, 2 schools in the Farmingdale area, and this school here. When we get much lower, what will happen to us? Or if our school gets older, what happens to it? Do you not then have a choice, like they say, all 3rd graders are gonna go to Hollowell and all high schoolers are gonna go to Monmouth? At what point do we say, we'd like to be more proactive and have a choice in this?
all right, any other questions or comments or concerns? All right, did everyone sign in? Awesome, all right, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
It's in the back, they're not signed. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a sign.
There's a sign in sheet, it's a posted pattern, not posted.
You know, just a few slides, what everybody went through. We were hoping it would be. Good, well, thank you for that. We appreciate that.
Right.